When it was first revealed to the world in 2004, no one anticipated that the Nintendo DS would become such a massive success. With a strong library, smart marketing campaigns, and revisions to the console, the Nintendo DS became one of the most successful game systems of all time. In early 2009, the Nintendo DS passed the 100 million mark for total systems sold, becoming the fourth system to ever do so, and only the second from Nintendo. But like with many giants of the ever-progressing game industry, a console's shelf life is fleeting. For the DS, its final days were just beginning. This is the story of the Nintendo DS. In this final part, we'll be looking at the Nintendo DS's final days as Nintendo's premier handheld, the final few games released for the system, and the legacy that the DS has left behind. It would only take Nintendo a year after the release of the DSi to launch their next iteration of the system. The Nintendo DSi XL was revealed in October of 2009, with a Japanese launch following in November. The DSi XL was originally planned to release alongside the regular DSi, but time constraints caused the system to be delayed internally. The DSi featured the same hardware as the regular DSi, but boasted larger screens for both the top and bottom of the handheld. The DSi XL marked a turning point for Nintendo handhelds. Since the Game Boy was first introduced, Nintendo's handheld consoles would receive revisions that made the system smaller and more compact. This even carried over to their home consoles back in the 1990s. Nintendo of America waited until the spring of 2010 before releasing the DSi XL. The system retailed for $189.99, the highest price point a Nintendo DS console would ever be sold for outside of special bundles. While the larger screens were appreciated, many critics and fans seemed to agree that the system seemed unnecessary, especially since the DS would soon be 6 years old. For players who already had a DSi, they were given the unfortunate news that any of their downloaded games from DSiWare would have to be rebought on the DSi XL. Unenthusiastic support for the DSi XL and low sales led Nintendo to give a price cut to the DSi line of systems. Both the DSi and the DSi XL would receive a $20 price cut before the holidays in 2010, bringing the systems to $149.99 and $169.99 respectively. While the DSi XL saw a stunted launch, part of that could have been attributed to a major announcement Nintendo made just weeks before its launch. Announced via a press release on March 23, 2010, Nintendo told the world of the true successor to the Nintendo DS. The Nintendo 3DS was the company's next handheld, and they would have more to say about it at E3 2010. While a few details were available in the press release, two major factors stood out. One, the Nintendo 3DS would be completely backwards compatible with Nintendo DS software. Two, the system would offer glasses-free 3D. 2010 saw fewer major Nintendo titles released for the DS as developers began to shift support to the upcoming 3DS. However, this didn't stop big DS titans from coming to the system. Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver saw their North American release in early 2010, bringing an end to the franchise's fourth generation. Nintendo published sequels in the Golden Sun and Fossil Fighters franchises graced the system, as well as Fire Emblem New Mystery of the Emblem. New Mystery of the Emblem is a remake of the third installment of the Fire Emblem franchise that originally released on the Super Famicom. Unlike previous Fire Emblem titles, this one was only released in Japan. Third-party releases included Shantae Risky's Revenge, a DSiWare sequel to the Game Boy Color original, Dementium 2, and Ghost Trick Phantom Detective. E3 2010 would see the Nintendo DS being put on the back burner, as its successor, the 3DS, was brought up for full display. Nintendo made sure to showcase the glasses-free 3D to as many people as possible during the conference, while also highlighting the expanded power the 3DS offered. Much like the DSi and DSi XL, the 3DS did not offer a Game Boy Advance slot, limiting certain games and accessories from the Nintendo DS library. Many features of the DS line of games would be available on the 3DS. The system still featured two screens, with the bottom screen being a touchscreen. The microphone was still in place, as well as the cameras from the DSi systems. The button layout remained the same, although the 3DS would include a circle pad for game movement. It wouldn't take long for the 3DS to hit store shelves. The 3DS released throughout Q1 of 2011. The North American launch of the 3DS came on March 27, 2011, at a retail price of $249.99. Sales for the 3DS fell below expectations, causing Nintendo to post another quarterly loss in June of 2011. In response, the 3DS received a massive price cut of $70, bringing the retail price of the new system to $169.99 within just 6 months after its launch. With the 3DS being Nintendo's primary focus, new games for the DS were few and far between in 2011. Most of the notable games launched in early 2011, with many of them being localizations of titles already released in Japan. Radiant Historia, Okamiden, Pokemon Black and White, and many more managed to come out for the system despite more powerful hardware being available, although they wouldn't see the same success as earlier released Nintendo DS titles. Nintendo had one final game for the Nintendo DS with Pokemon Black and White 2. A sequel to the previous entries in the series, Black and White 2 launched only a year and a half later. Japan received the games in June of 2012, with other territories getting it in the fall of 2012. It was the final first-party release on the Nintendo DS. New releases for the Nintendo DS slowed to a crawl by 2012. Only 27 titles released for the system that year. 2013 would be even worse, as the system saw 11 new games, mostly licensed titles and ports of already existing 3DS titles. Despite previous Nintendo systems receiving support from the company long after the release of their successors, Nintendo ended their official support of the system in 2013, only 2 years after the launch of the 3DS. 2014 was the final year of new Nintendo DS games releasing, with 4 new titles. Big Hero 6 Battle in the Bay released on the Nintendo DS and 3DS on November 28, 2014, bringing an end to the DS's life almost 10 years after it released in North America. While Nintendo ended support for the DS in 2013, the company quickly took the system's popularity to a new level in 2014. Announced in late January of that year, Nintendo DS games would be coming to the Wii U as part of the system's virtual console. Nintendo DS titles wouldn't come out for a few more months on the Wii U, with the first title, Brain Age, releasing in Japan in June of 2014. In total, 31 Nintendo DS games came to the Wii U, all of which were Nintendo-published titles. The Nintendo DS was more than just a successful game console. Nintendo completely changed their marketing strategies with the release of the DS, which led to the most successful period in the company's history. The DS not only outsold its direct competitor, the PSP, but also held its own in a growing market of cheap downloadable titles for phones and other mobile devices. Over 154 million Nintendo DSs were sold during its reign atop the console market. On the software side, the Nintendo DS moved an astounding 948 million games, with no digital distribution platform in place for much of the system's life. All told, the Nintendo DS is the best-selling handheld game console of all time, and the second best-selling game system ever, only being barely beaten by the PlayStation 2. It isn't hard to see why. The Nintendo DS was an incredibly influential game console during my teenage years. I currently own 6 Nintendo DS systems, 2 of which came from my childhood. I've logged thousands of hours across the various games released for the system. One of my fondest memories was traveling with my mother to a GameStop in April of 2007, where I purchased copies of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl before the Sunday morning church service. 4 years later, I returned to that same GameStop to purchase Pokemon Black and White with my girlfriend, who I would marry just a few years later. The Nintendo DS was the ultimate companion for a young, dumb kid. Long card trips were simply a chance to dive into whatever games the system had on offer. I played my DS so much that the hinges on my first one broke, requiring a replacement. Desperate to play more Pokemon, I used Scotch tape in an attempt to play my system. It didn't work. I wasn't the only one in the house with the DS, as my sister and brother both received the system after I did. We had a lot of fun playing Mario Kart DS and Mario Party DS together over the years. The DS was the only system that we were all able to truly bond together with, as my siblings generally preferred more casual gaming experiences while I still lived at home. Even in high school, when gaming wasn't exactly cool, I continued playing my DS. Countless RPGs graced my cartridge slot in the late 2000s and early 2010s. It's the system that I first played Chrono Trigger on, my favorite game of all time. I packed my DS on any trip I had to make. I even snuck it into my pocket for my first high school dance. I never played it there, but it was just nice to have the system with me. Eventually, it came time to retire my DS. On Christmas morning 2011, I opened the box to a brand new Nintendo 3DS, much like I did 5 years earlier with my DS Lite. While the system itself was retired, I continue to play Nintendo DS games on my 3DS to this day. I've bought more DS games as an adult, with my collection nearing 100 different titles. To say the least, the Nintendo DS was one of the most impactful game systems I've ever had, and I look forward to making new memories with the countless classics I still haven't played. Thank you for watching. This is the final part of a multi-part series on the Nintendo DS. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to this channel to catch the next video as soon as it releases. In the comments, let me know what game console, or gaming event you would like for me to cover on this channel. And once again, thank you for watching.